Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be getting started in just a few moments, so if I could ask you to take your seats and draw your attention to the stage. I will be bothering you for just a few moments before we get to the main event. My name's Sandra Martin, and I'm the standards editor at the Globe and Mail. I'm so pleased that you could all join us today for our presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail's headquarters are located on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. My colleagues and I are truly grateful for the opportunity to work and live on this land. And now, without further ado, let's get to the presentation today. It's often difficult for entrepreneurs to separate family from business when planning their legacy. And this intertwined transition is often challenging. There's no formula, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And with the generation entering retirement in droves and changing business landscape, these conversations are increasingly top of mind for many families and many entrepreneurs alike. So during today's event, our speakers will be examining some of the common questions that arise when building a succession plan. And with that, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Francesco Barbera. Francesco is the founding academic director of the Family Business Institute and an associate professor of entrepreneurship and strategy at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Toronto Metropolitan University. Please join us on the stage, Francesco.
Am I clicking through this, or is there a clicker for me? It's on the podium. This guy here. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, so thank you for having me, and thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm really glad an event like this is happening. My first sort of reaction to this was finally we are talking about these things. I know that everybody in the room is probably already converted or interested in some way, shape, or form, so I won't go into too much detail. But that said, I do realize that I am the opening talk, and this is a very quick one. It's about 10 minutes or so. So I was asked to speak about this concept of succession versus sale, and I had some reactions to that. The initial sort of reaction I had was, okay, transition is inevitable. Both these sort of actions or events represent a major transition for any business, quite frankly. The initial also sort of, for those who are sort of thinking of this, succession versus sale, the first thought that might come to your head is these two things are diametrically opposed. But in fact, I want to sort of tie them together. I want to also turn this presentation on its head and sort of say, well, actually, it's not about succession versus sale. It's about what is the unit of analysis that we're thinking of when it comes to these kinds of transitions. Because family businesses, as we all know, are different. There are two very complex entities that are interacting with one another, right? We all know how complex family is. We all come from one of those, and we understand how messy that can get. But also businesses are very complex organizations, groups of people. Whenever you have essentially groups of people trying to come together to achieve some kind of goal, it gets messy. And there are different considerations when we're thinking of sale versus passing it on. From the business perspective, obviously, this is the classic strategic management sort of stuff. What is the health of the business? What are the industry trends, right? What is the purpose of the business, right? Because potentially the purpose of the business could be to harvest eventually so that the family can have a foundation of wealth that can then be used for other objectives that the family has. But from the family's perspective, what is the meaning of the business, right? What sort of emotional attachments do we have to this thing called the business? And how do those emotional attachments affect our decision to sell or pass it along? Obviously, what are the capabilities of the family themselves? Do we have the talent within, or do we need to outsource that, or do we need to develop that eventually from some member of the family? And finally, what do we want for ourselves? What are the family's aspirations? Do we dream to have this legacy in the form of a business, a specific kind of operations that defines us? Or are there other, perhaps higher, more abstract aspirations that we might have? I wanted to just to take the liberty, because I think it's interesting, to show you some data. I hope it's showing up okay. There's a dark orange and a light orange. This is about the goals of transition. These data are based on some data that we collected a while back. I figured I would show you, because I think it's really telling. These are based on 200 small and medium and even large firms across the United States. We did a project just before COVID hit. But what I thought, regardless of the year of the data or the source, these kinds of variations, and I'm comparing family versus non-family here, stand across any country, any time period. I've seen it time and time again. And this is about what are your goals. And so the dark orange line is, the light orange line, whenever it's larger or past the dark orange line, that means that family firms ranked that particular goal higher than non-family firms and vice versa. And you can start seeing some of the differentials. So ensuring your company remains viable in the long run, regardless of whether or not you're still involved, is a major objective for family firms, in terms of more so than non-family firms. When you look at maintaining family harmony, I think that's a more obvious one. But again, post-sale, maintaining family harmony is a major objective for family businesses. Different to non-family. So the point of this is family firms are different to non-family firms with respect to their goals for transition. And I won't go through all of these, and I presume these slides will be made available if anyone is interested to go deeper. And why? Why is it that family firms are different? What is the thing that makes them different potentially? And I wanted to introduce you a really interesting concept that I speak about every day in the classroom, but perhaps this audience wouldn't get the theoretical perspective regularly, so I just wanted to introduce this. And it's this concept called socio-emotional wealth. So I presume many people here are business-oriented folks. We all understand the concept of financial wealth, economic wealth, right? And it can be said from an economic perspective that a business, the main purpose of a business is just to generate maximum profits for its owners. But what's interesting is that there's other kinds of wealth as well, right? Non-economic type wealth. And in family firms, they tend to focus on these non-economic wealth drivers. And I've listed some of the dimensions here. So just having control, being able to make decisions in and of itself is a form of satisfaction that creates this emotional wealth. Identification with the business, the idea that these firms, the families, so sometimes the family's name is the business name. It's very difficult to separate the identity of the family versus the identity of the business. Binding social ties, so all the contacts, the friendships, the lasting relationships with various stakeholders that happens while you're in business. The ability to maintain family harmony, which I touched upon previously, and keeping it in the family. So keeping it in the family, in and of itself, is a kind of pride and strength, and so you could call it building that legacy, that gives family firms a kind of wealth. And so the size and the endowment of the SEW is the acronym, of the SEW. So the size of the SEW endowment is actually going to dictate the extent to which a family business is willing to sell at all, and then, of course, the extent to which they'll value the business. Because we do have an economic value, but then there are also the non-economic value that needs to be considered when selling. So I'll say, there are challenges with either option. I'm going really high level here. I'm sure today you'll hear all about the specifics. But basically, with succession, how do we begin the planning process, right? And it is a process. It starts somewhere, and it continues on until the event of transition. So transition is an event. Succession is a long process. How do we develop the next generation, right? How do we develop that talent? How do we manage the incumbent's exit? And there are many ways an incumbent can exit. Not all of those are positive. How do we prepare the business for transfer? I've heard a lot of talk about, well, how do we get the next generation, educated and understanding the existing business. But a more interesting question might be, how do you get the existing business to better match the up-and-coming generation? Because the up-and-coming generation needs to have that pride, that sense of ownership that, unless that's there, there's going to be problems. And on the flip side, challenges with selling. What are the steps to selling a business? This is the classic challenges that all small firms face. How do we value the business? How do we minimize our taxes, of course? How do we manage employee well-being, et cetera? What do we do with the money that we make, right? What's next? And that's what I'll skip this. These are transfer topics of importance. These are what advisors are saying that family firms need to worry about when it comes to transferring. The number one is tax minimization, and these are in order. So number one, tax minimization, company valuation, the typical things you would expect coming from advisors. But I want to ask, what's the unit of analysis here? As I said, I'm going to turn this on its head. From a business perspective, the sale of a family business represents the end. And these are the famous statistics that only so many family firms make it from generation 1 to generation 4. In fact, only 3% at the end of the day make it from G1 to G4, right? But why is this happening? It's happening because of a lack of planning, uninterested successors, need to harvest, declining business performance, all the reasons you would expect. But from a family perspective, and this is where I want to end it off, the sale or closure of a business does not represent the end. It's just a shift, and we can play on words, a shift from a family business to a business family, a family in business. When, as I said, there's these two entities. When the business disappears, the family then inherits the wealth, and from this wealth, new things can be created, and we can transform into that business family. You can have other businesses, other spin-offs. We can have investments, a foundation. The idea of, those long-lasting families that sometimes we think about when we think of family businesses. So that is how I want to leave it. I'm out of time. How do we do that? Excuse me, I should say. This is more about organizing the family to diversify their wealth and then hiring professional management to take over. As I said, I'm rushed. I hope I got it all in there. I'm say thank you very much.
Francesco, that was really a lot to cover in a short period of time. And if I may, if you're going to be around, I would urge our participants to come see you if they have questions and chat with you during our networking periods throughout the day. He said absolutely, in case you didn't hear. Our first panel today, we're going to shift into that right now. We'll be focused on exploring the complexities of transitioning a family business to the next generation. And for that, I'd like to welcome our panelists to the stage now. First, Kathy Cheng, who's the president of WS&Co. And the founder of Redwood Classics Apparel. Shirni Chandaria, president of Conross Corporation and the president of LePage's 2000. And her sister Sheena Chandaria, the VP of Sales and Corporate Affairs at Conross. And joining us remotely, we have a fourth panelist, Roger Greenberg, Executive Chairman of the Board of the Minto Group and Chairman of the Board of Trustees of Minto Apartment REIT. So thank you all so much for being a part of today's discussion. Why don't we start by hearing a little bit more about you individually? I'll sort of go across the table, starting with you, Kathy. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. So my name is Kathy Cheng. I'm from a company called Redwood Classics. We're one of the few full-service apparel manufacturers that is still proudly producing on Canadian soil, which is a bit of a rarity. I am second generation on Canadian soil. We say third generation in textiles because my grandparents were also in textiles back in Hong Kong when, my parents were born. And my parents actually met in a factory back in the day when Hong Kong was once a textile hub. So,
All right, thank you. And Shirni.
So we are in the manufacturing and distribution of stationery tapes, mailing and shipping supplies. We compete with 3M. And I would say in terms of where we are in G2, G3, kind of similar to your story, Kathy. Our grandfather, had built a sizable business back in Kenya in chemicals. And so G3 from that perspective, but really G2. Our parents had emigrated to Canada back in the 70s and built a few different businesses, and that's where we're at now.
And Sheena, tell us about your role.
So I'm in a bit of a transitional role because I've got 3 young children at home. So while Shirley's kind of running our operating business, I'm supporting her on the side. I'm more on the operation side, and really, we work together to make sure that everything's kind of running smoothly.
All right, thanks. And Roger, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. My name is Roger Greenberg. I'm the executive chair of Minto. Minto is a real estate developer that's been in existence for 68 years. It's founded by 4 brothers, primarily built by my uncle and my father. My father passed away in 1980, and my father passed away in 1991. I joined Minto on a full-time basis in 1985, and then moved back to Ottawa to assume the presidency and CEO when my uncle passed away in 1991. So I was chair, I was its president and CEO of Minto from 1991 to 2013, when we promoted Michael Waters to be my successor as CEO, and today I am the executive chair of the company. I call myself that to note that I'm not a non-executive chair, as you'll see with a lot of public companies. I'm very involved with Michael, but Michael runs the show. I collaborate with him on vision and strategy and shareholder and board relationships, but Michael is the day-to-day operator of the business as CEO.
Okay, Roger, we're going to stay with you for the first question, but I'd like to invite our other panelists to add to the conversation with each question. Can you share with us, Roger, what role professional facilitators have played in the Minto Group's journey as a company?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we're referring to succession and shareholders as opposed to the business itself.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right. Well, I think the first 5 or 6 years after I took over, well, first I should say that when my uncle was alive, even though he had cancer, we did 0 succession planning. So when he passed away, notwithstanding that he was quite ill with cancer, there was no succession planning discussion. There was no succession plan in place. Perhaps it's for another day to describe how that process managed to be overcome successfully, but it was quite the process. But then sort of 7 or 8 years after my uncle had passed away, and we realized that Minto could actually succeed being run by the second generation, we began a process to evolve from what the literature would call, we were accidental partners. My siblings, my cousins and I were partners only because we were born to brothers, into a planned partnership. And as part of that planned partnership process that took place over a number of years, we had excellent facilitators, particularly for the family itself, a husband and wife couple out of Topeka, Kansas, that became very good friends of all of ours, as well as professional legal and accounting advice to help us structure a lot of things, including shareholders agreement, a board of directors, and then a whole bunch of other things. So facilitators always played a very, very important role to help siblings who were very close with each other, but would sometimes have a little difficulty communicating with each other.
So were these facilitators in your circle? You mentioned that your uncle didn't do a lot of succession planning. How did you connect with those facilitators, and how did you know that they would be the right fit?
Well, we didn't. The first facilitator that when the family decided that we wanted to begin this process that I pushed along, the first facilitator that we hired out of Philadelphia bombed in the opening meeting and lasted maybe 20 minutes. And so we had to sort of rejig ourselves and went through a process where we had a number of family members that interviewed prospective candidates, and they came back with a recommendation to the rest of the family about this couple from Topeka that we connected incredibly, and we're close friends for many years until sadly the one of the members just passed away a few months ago from cancer in his 70s. So it's hard to define what it is that makes people get along with one another, but they were an invaluable couple to help us. They had both a psychiatry background and a business planning network. And if you can imagine, in the late 1990s, this was not a broad profession that many people had expertise in. So we were very lucky.
All right. Kathy, Shirney, and Sheena, anything you'd like to add about collaborating with facilitators and bringing them on board? Did you have any experience?
So for us, we're actually just undergoing a bit of an exploration right now. For us, we're just undergoing a bit of an exploration right now, trying to determine who the right facilitator would be for some of the discussions that are going to be coming up. But I think, making sure that everybody feels comfortable with the individual or firm that's chosen is probably the most important, so that you can really get to the depth of the conversations that need to be had in order to move the needle forward.
Right.
Truthfully, I was quite surprised when I was even asked to join this panel, because we're very much in the infancy stage of the succession planning, and quite honestly, I didn't even know this existed. This is, I guess, why I'm here to learn as well with everyone.
Oh, thank you. Well, something we discussed on our prep call is that each of you is in sort of a different stage. So you're at the beginning, Shirney and Sheena, you're sort of at that next stage, and Roger is sort of the most mature in terms of succession planning experience. So going back to you, Roger, your CEO is a non-family member. Was there any hesitancy among the family with putting someone outside of the family in such an important leadership position?
No, I think probably there wasn't, for two reasons. That number one, no other family member wanted to take on my job when I wanted to step back from that. I think you have to just, to keep things, to provide the context of it. Our father had passed away very suddenly at the age of 57 from a heart attack, without any warning whatsoever. And my uncle passed away at 61 from cancer. So longevity is not something on the Mayo Greenberg side that we expected. And so unlike most business people that would think in their late 50s and early 60s, they're just hitting their prime perhaps, we had much more morbid thoughts. And so when I took over at 35, I said to everybody that I would do it for 15 years, and then I intended to step back. Somehow or another, at the age of 45, I realized that 50 was coming up a little too quickly, and that I didn't know what the heck I would do with my life if I actually retired at 50. So I pushed it back to 50, and then for a bunch of different reasons, it didn't actually happen until I turned 57. So, I mean, the family all knew that I was not going to do this job and get carried out in a pine box. But since nobody else stepped forward, and we had hired a crackerjack CFO in 2007, I think one of the keys for us was everybody knew Michael Waters. Everybody saw him grow, saw his wisdom, his excellence with people. And so it was a very easy decision when we made, even though we did do an external look-see just to see who was out there in 2012, but it was a very easy decision for us to make, all of us together, that Michael would succeed me in 2013. And the proof is in the pudding with everything that we've seen since then.
So alignment was easy to achieve in your family. Shirney, that's not always the case necessarily. You've talked about the importance of seeking alignment among family members through the process of succession planning, whatever the road will look like for you. Why is this important? And can you, and Sheena as well, please add your thoughts. What are some of the ways that families can achieve this?
Sure. So I'll give a bit of background. Our family went through a breakup back in 2007. It was my father's generation. You know, they built a sizable business, and unfortunately, everyone wasn't aligned in terms of the next steps for the business. And so I think for us, what it did for us was we grew up with a family that was very tight, very close-knit, and what seemingly was very highly aligned. And when this event happened, it kind of really pulled our foundations and our rug right from under us, from the cousins' perspective. And so, you know, we spent many years kind of, I think, the three of us, it's Sheena, myself, and my brother, just kind of trying to figure out what happened. And I think what, you know, where that's led us to is that it's so important to have these difficult conversations early and with as much transparency as possible, just to set expectations. And, you know, we've been going to many different discussions and, you know, speaking to a lot of different experts in this field. And the one thing that always really stands out is the forces that are pulling you apart as a either business family or a family business are much stronger than those keeping you together. So you really have to put a lot of intention behind wanting to stay together, and it has to be a very measured, very thought out, you know, well thought through process. And I guess, you know, the one thing that I wanted to add was there's a really novel approach that I came across. We haven't applied it yet, but, you know, we think about our next gen. We've got 9 kids or grandkids amongst the 3 of us. And there was this family that had actually gotten the next gen together and had them choose who the right person to wear the CEO hat would be. And I thought that was really interesting because I think it does a few things. One, it helped, you know, it kind of engenders that responsibility and mutual responsibility. The person that's been elected to take on that role, you know, knows that they've been elected by their peers. And then vice versa, they feel the responsibility of ensuring that everyone kind of thrives and, you know, does really well in the various roles that the rest of the group has been given. So I thought it was really interesting. I'd love to kind of connect with that family in 10 years to see how did that play out. But yeah, I think there's, you know, there isn't just one path for every family, and it's really thinking about what are the different ways to have these discussions early, to have them with a lot of transparency, to make sure that you're celebrating different people's strengths, so it's not just all embodied in one, and then, you know, to go for it.
No, I think just, this works, right? Yeah, so I just think, you know, from, you know, having that alignment, like we've always had a family member running our business, and so we've never kind of looked at the external piece, which is, I know how the question was posed to Roger, but Shirley and I discussed, you know, when she brought up this idea, I said, oh, okay, that's a really interesting thought, and I said, you know, that could end up creating some issues, and she said, yeah, but, you know, the idea is to have those difficult conversations earlier on, and then that way, you know, it all, rather than letting it kind of sit and bubble underneath, you know, it's really bring it all forward. And I thought, you know, it's a neat idea, and I mean, it'd be interesting to kind of see how it does play out, but you know, definitely as we bring in the next gen, it's really about how do we incorporate all of them, because there are 9 of them and not everybody's going to want to be in the business, but how do you kind of incorporate them so they're all part and parcel of it, or have, you know, some role to play, whether it's on the philanthropy side or, you know, whatever it might be, whatever their interest is, and really make sure that they feel included and that the family has a legacy that they can all partake in, I think.
All right, thank you. Well, staying with the 2 of you, and you touched on this earlier, how did you go about differentiating your respective roles? So now your roles are quite separate, but how did you get to that place? How did you avoid stepping on each other's toes? And was that ever a concern?
Yeah, sure. I could speak to that. So when our father took a step back, you know, all 3 of us, so as Shirley mentioned, we have a brother as well. So Shirley, Sunir, and I all were working in the operating business. And then as we kind of reallocated our resources, Sunir's responsibility shifted to the family office, and Shirley and I are responsible for our operating business now. And as siblings in business, you know, we do have a unique relationship. We work hard and play hard. We try to keep our working relationship as professional as possible. But I would say, you know, for Shirley and I especially, being sisters, I think it's a much more unique relationship from that sense. And I think, you know, growing up there, we were 6 years apart. We had our brother between us. And we definitely had quirks, call them, that as, you know, when we were younger, they got on each other's nerves, the quirks. And so I think as we've learned to work together, and maybe just through some maturity in age as well, we've really turned those quirks around and used them to as opportunities to strengthen our team as a whole, to really lift each other up. And now, we find that when we work together, we actually end up together, we work better, we're able to kind of fill each other's gaps. And so, we look at each other's strengths and, we're able to divide because we know that one of us is really good at this piece and one of us is really good at this piece. And so there is actually not a lot of stepping on each other's toes. And we're really leveraging that and harnessing that to build ourselves as a team. And so we're able to kind of, fight against the outside forces that way. Obviously, we still have disagreements, but, we try to get through them in a productive manner so as not to disrupt the business or the people around us.
And as you've both established, disagreement can be a positive tool for running a business and getting through issues. Yeah. Kathy, you're in a different boat. You're an only child.
Yes, I am.
So let's talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that can present. So you inherited the business from your father. How did you come to grips with what you would need to do as the sole child responsible for this family business?
So if maybe I can give a little backstory of even how I became the president and why I became my dad's business partner. We were your typical immigrant family. Came with absolutely nothing. My dad worked 3 jobs when we first came to Canada, and I was a latchkey kid at the age of 5, just to give you some context of where we've come from. Having said that, in 1988, he started this small sewing facility with his brother, sister, and himself. And by the late 90s, we had grown where we were directly employing close to 500 people, and this was all locally made. So we really are businesses, we power a number of retail and designer brands that have now become global brands. Having said that, if you all recall in 2001, China joins WTO, quotas get lifted, and basically everybody goes offshore. And so by the time it was 2008, it was in the middle of, the last global recession or current, and we were down to about 100, 150 people. So we had grown in size, and it was very evident that the business landscape could not support the infrastructure that we had. So really, we were left at the end of 2008 with not just a business decision, but really a family decision. And, he asked me to be his business partner, and I quite honestly didn't really want to, because when you're an only child and that business is everything of your family, that's the sibling you've never had. That takes all the attention, that takes, all the hardship and their time and energy. So, sorry, it's a very personal, emotional story for me. But ended up, he asked me, and I wasn't sure, but I remember being on the production floor amongst hummings of machines, and I think the word kind of got out that we may not be around anymore, and a number of our makers have been with us for 10, 20 years at this point. And it hit me like a ton of brick. And I was like, wow, we have this life that I've lived, and we have all these things because of our makers, this experience. And so, it's really interesting when the slides was about employees, because that is one of the main reasons why I became my dad's business partner. It wasn't just because I was taking over a business. It was a number of makers that allowed us to live the life that we had with social, economic, improvement, and we realized that we had a hand in all of that. So as an only child, it was, it's not easy. I will say, because of my experiences, and that being a very pivotal one, when I married my husband, I did say, if we have kids, we have to have 2. So I have 2 kids right now. That's not the only reason, but that is a big part, because when I witness relationships like this, it really, I think it's really special. So to all of you that have siblings, please cherish each other, because it is really, really special, because it does get very challenging and very lonely.
Shirney and Sheena, can I ask you to share advice that you might pass along to Kathy's kids as they prepare to possibly take over the family business? What would you tell them?
I think,
No, yeah.
I think, well, firstly, I think if you don't mind some experience share,
Yes.
Kathy. I think it's so important, even before you go down to the children's level, that just to make sure that your kids understand that they each have something of value to, that each of them have a different strength, and so making sure that we celebrate that, because that's the first step, I think, in avoiding the sibling tension that can happen. So if they feel comfortable in, their superpower, if you want to call it that, and recognize each other's different superpowers, I think that's a long way to having a successful relationship. And then just, making sure that they're having those difficult discussions early. In our culture, I think traditionally, my father and my uncles weren't used to having some of the difficult conversations early, and so their mentality, and not that it was, now we can say that maybe it wasn't the right approach, but back then that's probably what they were taught was, it's when there's an issue, it's actually better not to discuss it than to bring it up, because then you make it a thing, right? And in my view, I operate very, very differently, and I'd rather just get in front of it, talk about it, and then kind of resolve it and move on.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's
And then also just for yourself, obviously you're born, you aren't, but, some of us were born with siblings, but at the end of the day, for yourself, you can make your family too, right? So your family is really who you make it to be, because sometimes, you can have siblings that your siblings butt heads, and it's not always easy having, being born in the same household, because it doesn't always work so well. But, your family really is who you make it to be. So just cherish, the folks around you that really embody the vision that you believe in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Roger, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure, I would say to Kathy, I have 5 siblings, and I'd be willing to trade a couple of them for something. But no, I know I'm going to get heck for that later on from the siblings if they're watching. But no, I see the emotionalism that you have, being an only child, and the only thing that I would share is it's probably equally challenging when you have strong-willed family members who believe that whatever it is that they're talking about at a particular moment in time is the way it should be, and that's why we brought in a facilitator. The first thing we did was to develop what we called Jack and Ann, because that was their names, Jack and Ann's rules of how to conduct a meeting together, because we would talk over each other, we would talk at each other. We seemed to get along well enough to run the business okay, but when it came to sort of ownership and a lot of other issues that we had to deal with, we just couldn't communicate well. So having professional facilitators was a godsend for us. The only other thing I would say, a couple of things, is that number one, every family business is different. So I would say to everyone listening who are in a family business, what works for another family may be great, but it might not work for yours. So you can talk to a lot of people, you get ideas, and then you sit down and you have those difficult conversations to make sure that whatever it is that you're wearing, suit of clothes, whatever, like it has to fit your particular circumstances. That'd be number one. And number two, I'm a big believer in giving people choice. So you pick up the paper and you read from that, I guess, betrays my age, because online you don't do that. But I still have, I like the hard copy papers. You read of too many family businesses that people want to go in different directions, but they're being pulled together by unnatural forces. And that's not something that I've wanted for my children. It's not something that I've wanted for my family. We have a shareholders agreement that defines, we did that in 2004 before there were any issues, and it's helped guide us in our relationships to this very day. You can't keep people together if they don't want to be together.
All right, well, thanks for that. Kathy, I want to take it back to you for another question.
Yeah.
You spent a great deal of time digitizing your family's business,
Yes.
and that is something that many entrepreneurs struggle with. What advice would you have for people who are considering or beginning to take on this task?
I would say start early. And again, I'm going to give a backstory. As an apparel manufacturer in Canada, when labor is cents to a dollar, right? It is very, very challenging. So quite honestly, I don't even know if I just remember, like, we treated the business like an upstart. When I became my dad's business partner, I remember looking up one day and realizing, oh my gosh, like, we've grown. We went from 40 people to now 100 people, and realized, oh, we need to start putting processes. We need to start digitizing. So I would say, one is start early. Two is also bring the people along. I mean, I've got arguably 3 generations, 4 generations in my business. You know, there's a lot of people that have, a lot of our makers that have been part of our journey, you know, that's been with us for 30 years. How do we make them feel comfortable? How do we ensure that they don't feel like we're moving away from them? And so I often want to make sure that they're part of the process, in the sense was, is this making you feel comfortable? What is it your needs are? And also I really want to ensure that they recognize this is all out of care for them, because technology has changed, the world has changed, and things are moving so much faster. There's so many more ways to be efficient, but how do we minimize the threat that they may feel? So I think trying to create a relatively safe environment, but let them know at the end of the day, this is the vision and this is the reason why we're doing it. It's for the longevity of all of us. I have found that that's been quite helpful.
All right, well, once again, we've scratched the surface. I do want to leave some time for questions from our in-person and our virtual audience. So I don't know if we've got any questions in the queue from online, but perhaps we could start by seeing if there's anyone in the room who'd like to ask a question of any of our panelists. If not, I have questions. Sorry, do we need a mic?
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but...
It's also for the people at home or in their offices. They're not necessarily at home.
So I suppose this question is for Sherney and Sheena. Your advice was start young with planning through transition. My kids are 3, 5, and 7. What does starting young look like? How young, and how do you start involving them in your business, you know, before a typical working age, or how did you think about that with your parents' transition to you?
So our experience was that, you know, at those ages, I'd say, you know, just really sharing this story, like this, our grandfather's story, his move from India to East Africa, and then our parents' story, their move from, you know, East Africa to Canada, and then what the business is, but at a very like simple level at that age, it's really about the storytelling. My kids are 15, 12, and 7, and so a little bit older than yours, and my elder 2 are the oldest of the 9. And so really I'm starting to really think about like what's a bit of an education program, an appropriate one that we can put together for the whole next gen, so that they're being exposed to the right things at the right time. I don't have the answer for you yet, but if you give me your card, we're actually literally just in the process of laying that out. And I'm very highly motivated because of the ages of my children. I'm also a member of YPO, which is a great organization which has allowed me to figure out a bit of the exposure that I can give them at early ages. But at the ages of your children, I'd just say like the storytelling and emphasizing, you know, I don't know if your parents or your grandparents are part of, no. So, you know, just the storytelling.
And really, and the exposure really, so I don't know what the business is, but like really, you know, whether it's taking them in, you know, to a physical location and just showing them, you know, on the weekends or whenever they have a day off school, and just, you know, letting them have that exposure.
If I may experience share, actually, I grew up in the family business as well. And for me, I think back, that's why I was so emotional and felt the sense of, I need to do it not just for my immediate family, but also for our family of makers. And because I've always been very personally connected to it. So once I had kids, up until COVID, my kids were coming into the factory whenever they could. Every Chinese New Year's, they're dressed up in their, you know, traditional outfit, and I make them go say hello to every single department, start off with your grandfather, because I want them to know, and I want them to understand that we didn't do this alone. It wasn't just your grandfather, it wasn't just me that has built this for all of us. So I think paying that respect is really important. And one of my best gifts I ever got from my daughter, I think when she was 8, she drew this drawing, and she's like, Mommy, she drew this drawing with her and saying she wanted to be a boss first, which I was kind of proud of. And in the background, it was like little bits of the factory. So I think those are the maybe traditions or just things that you can do. And before you know it, they'll start getting interested. And my daughter asked me about that. And now, she's at school, and because some of the brands we make for her, she'll be like, Mommy, so you make for this brand? And I think there's a bit of pride in that comes along with it. So just integrating in all aspects of your life, I think.
All right, we have time for one more question. Okay, why don't I pose one to all of our panelists before we say goodbye. How do you handle the pressure of previous generations' success or errors they might have made? Let's start with you, Sheena and Sherney.
I mean, I think it's really like the world today is so different than it was, whether it was like the last generation or 2 generations ago. But it's really about, learning from mistakes that were made, learning from experiences that were had. And I mean, in terms of the pressure, I mean, we're lucky that we have each other to kind of rely on to talk through, ideas, strategies, just as, whether things are going really well or things are going really badly, like, at least somebody that has the equal responsibility that, you can really get a different perspective to help us through it. But I mean, in terms of relieving the pressure, it's constant. Like, yeah,
that's the reality,
yeah.
right? Like in today's world, as we all know, change is, the constant. And so just trying to stay on top of that and trying to keep encouraging our teams to, for us, in our organization, we've really adopted these 4 mindsets that are so important for anyone new coming on to our team or anyone within our team that needs to develop them. And it's around growth mindset, curiosity, resilience, and relentlessness. And we speak about this all the time, every day, all the time at our weekly huddles, in our, smaller team meetings. And yeah, so I know that didn't really answer the question around the pressure, but it's like, if you know that your team is well equipped, that they're better able to handle the pressure, it takes a bit of the pressure off.
So mine is pretty simple. This is something that I've learned most recently, and I'm still on this journey, is recognizing where we are today and how we got here isn't the way we need to move forward. And I just constantly remind myself, it doesn't lessen the pressure, but when I'm under pressure, and there's, maybe misalignments in perspectives and views on how to move forward, that is what I have to remind myself.
I'll just add one more thing. The other thing that we've, I think, done a pretty good job of is reaching out to our network of professional, whether it's professionals or just people that we know that have the expertise in the particular area that we're dealing with, the challenge that we might be dealing with at that one time. That's been really helpful as well.
All right. And Roger, anything super quickly? I'm getting the blinking red light to say we're out of time, but would like to ask you if you have anything to add.
Well, I'd say in our situation with my uncle, because he passed away, it wasn't living up to his expectations because he wasn't around any longer. And I just said to everybody, look, this is our company now to deal with. Whatever he would have done or could have done or should have done or whatever is irrelevant now. We have our values. We're going to run it as best as we can. And if we're successful, great. And if we aren't, that's on us. It's not on him.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Roger, Sheena, Sherney, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to give them all.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, and I have the great honor of introducing our next speaker. And shifting gears a little bit, psychological factors can influence decision-making in legacy planning. And our next presenter, Lorna Johnston, is the founder of the Change Institute. She'll be providing strategies for overcoming emotional biases when making decisions for both your family and your business. So please come to the stage. Welcome, Lorna.
Okay. There was a time when business owners, and I think it's too frequent even now, didn't really think that understanding human behavior and the complexities of human behavior would actually help them run better businesses. And I think that that bias, that old belief, is very slowly dying, that we're coming to realize that we need to understand human behavior if we're going to lead people in a way that they get to thrive and foster as human beings. The topic is about psychology, and I want to just make something explicit, that when we think of psychology, many people think of the unconscious. And unconscious is about Freud and Jung, about these deep elements within us that is very hard to tap into. The type of psychology that I have studied and I'm qualified in is a psychology that focuses on relationship. The relationship I have with myself and the relationship that I have with other people. And if I could understand something about my inner workings in those relationships, then I could change what isn't working. And I can't change what isn't working if I don't have any level of self-awareness about how have I put together the story of my life? How have I come to decide who I am? And more difficultly in businesses, but family businesses especially, is do I get to be who I am, or must I adapt to the system, to the family system, in order to be accepted, in order to be respected? So the connection between understanding ourselves and how we relate to other people has everything to do, I think, with how successful a business is in terms of their bottom line, and certainly it affects how successful they are in transitioning to the next generation. So many of you might have seen this three-circle model. It's not the same as what you might have experienced before. This model is about talking about the person, and it is who I am as a person, how I put together and structured my belief system that really determines how I take up my role, whatever that role is. If I'm in business, one of my roles will be as a leader or as an employee, and who I am shapes how I show up in those roles. In family businesses, you've got other additional roles besides being a leader or an employee. You are also a family, and in every family, we take up different roles. I'm the youngest in my family of 4, and I know that the role that I took up as the youngest is not the same role that my older siblings took up. That we know in family that in family systems, often there will be one child who will be the compliant one, follows the rules and does what people want, and another child might take up a different role, the one that might be considered difficult. Roger might be one of those siblings that you might want to trade in. So family members learn to take up different roles in the family, and those roles really inhibit their capacity to show up fully as themselves. And the family system inadvertently, I think, colludes with keeping people in boxes and keeping them behaving in a way that makes the family comfortable. The other complexity in family businesses is that while we've got all of these roles that people take up, they are in service of 2 separate systems. They're in service of the business system, the business success, the business's growth, but they're also in service of the family business. And we don't really understand very much about the family system unless you are a psychotherapist and are trained in the psychology of relationships. I noticed that Roger said that the people that worked with his family had a psychiatric background. Those people with that kind of background have a deep understanding of what are the dynamics underneath the surface. In my vernacular, I don't talk about the unconscious. I talk about what is outside of our conscious awareness. And that's hopeful, because if it's outside my conscious awareness, my task is to bring it into awareness. And when I have awareness, then I can choose, do I want to keep the beliefs that I have? Do I like the way I communicate? Am I okay with how I show up with my feelings? And every family, of course, has rules around feelings as well. Some are acceptable and some aren't. I've given the picture of an iceberg to describe that on the surface there are things that we have awareness. It is explicit. We know, if you think of a business, we know the environment, we know what it takes to grow a business. We've got lots of advisors to help us make explicit what the business needs to be successful. But at the human level, we have to mine for what is underneath the surface. And what's underneath the surface, the part that is outside of my awareness, is what is going to take me down. If I don't know that how I'm operating, how I'm communicating, how I show up with you, how respectful I am or not, even if my intention is to be effective and my intention is to be respectful, that isn't necessarily how other people experience it. So the psychological realm, which I'm now going to hope you translate that to mean the realm that I'm not aware of. And if you think of the Titanic, they weren't aware underneath the surface was a whole huge iceberg, and they sunk. And I think there's something true about that metaphor, that what we're not aware of does have the capacity to rob us of our success, our competence, our satisfaction, because we're not aware of, we can't change. And as human beings, we are wired to change. Growth and development is part of our human condition. So if we're not growing and developing, there's something that is stopping that process. And we need to find out what that is. And it will be some limiting decisions I would have made in my childhood that aren't based on the whole deck. They're based on a child's experience in the family system, and that childhood experience is very much alive and well, whether you're in a family business or you're in the corporate world. We are continuing to be influenced by our early experiences. And to understand what those influences are gives you a lot of power and authority, really, over your life. This is saying the same thing in a different way, because I'm specifically addressing the issue of decisions, that what the decision is what's explicit, it's what we know about. What we don't know about is how come really that decision was made. What was the dynamic that was going on in the decision makers? As an individual, back to my three-circle model, for the person has an unconscious process, an out-of-awareness process. The family also has an unconscious process. They're not aware of the dynamic within the family system. There are even people that talk about this unconscious, out-of-awareness dynamic that happens in all groups. And if the group or the family isn't focused on solving problems and moving toward solution, something else is happening. So what is happening when that process isn't working, where it's not going forward? That's what we need to discover in this realm of group dynamics, and also in the realm of the personal dynamics, because we're people first. We take up roles second, and we take up our place differently. You'll have heard well, you won't have heard it. This might be the first time, but at least one person in the room has heard it before. What doesn't get talked out gets acted out. And you can't talk out what's happening on the inside, my insecurities, the beliefs I hold about what you think of me, my feelings. If I don't know what I feel, how can I talk about my feelings? And if you grew up in a family where there were a suppression of feelings, we've learned to numb them, we've learned to deny them, we've learned to substitute them. But somebody might feel sad and they yell instead, or they yell when they're really feeling scared. So we've got lots of confusion in our feelings. And if we don't know what's happening on the inside, if I can't talk about what's happening for me, I will act it out. And the acting out doesn't work always in my favor. And this is the process at the human level within me. This is the process also that happens between people, where at the individual level we have an experience. You're having an experience here. You have some feelings about the experience. And from the belief that we form as a result of an experience and the feelings that happen at the same time, we begin to act in particular ways. And how I act invites you, the other, to respond to me in a way that inadvertently, outside of our awareness, reinforces my original belief. I've worked with a family with my siblings, so I understand Roger's comment. In my current business, have worked with my daughter. So I know deep in my bones how difficult it is for families to work together and still maintain their capacity to be a family, to be a mother, to be a sister. And back to my plea for you to develop yourself, to pursue personal development. And I do think that psychotherapy is a really great option. In today's world, you don't have to be sick. You never did have to be sick to get better. You don't have to be ill in order to find healing, because everybody in every family system has been wounded by the system. We've been wounded by our parents, by our siblings. And that's the human condition. It's true for all of us. And if we're not in touch with what our woundingness is, what my feelings are, what my thoughts are, what my beliefs, that I need to talk them out. So I remember, certainly when I worked with my siblings, I was pretty sure that I knew what they thought about me. I have the business background. They did not. I'm the youngest. Now that really confuses it, because the youngest, you might remember if you are the youngest, is never as smart as the older ones. And we don't ever quite get to grow up in the family. So I was sure that they would not respect my opinion about some of the business decisions that we were making. So because I had that belief, I had that feeling that alternated between being kind of angry about all that and resentful and a little bit dug in. And wouldn't you know, when I would talk to my siblings about business, the response I got wasn't necessarily what I would have hoped. And it reinforced that I knew I was right. They really didn't respect me. But it starts with me and my attitude, if you will, to them. And I've got very few seconds to give you a concept that I hope you take away. You get to see this because it's being recorded. But the unconscious, the out-of-awareness, the out-of-aware process has to do with what my beliefs are about me. And my beliefs about me can be either I am valued, I am worthy of respect, I am smart, I have something to contribute. That's collected into this phrase, I'm okay, meaning all of me and my essence is okay. Or along that same spectrum, I might conclude that there's something not okay about me. I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough, I'm not lovable. at our core, but I'll have all kinds of limiting beliefs. So that's about me, my beliefs about me, and that affects my relationship with me. Then it's the other. It's the part that in the previous slide where I talk about the response I get from others. And I begin to conclude something about other people. I conclude the other is worthy of my respect. The other is valuable and have something to contribute. The other is acting in the way they are for very good reasons. I just don't know what they are. And if I don't take things personally, I can hold an attitude toward the other of valuing them, of respecting them, of seeing them as being worthy and deserving of my respect. So if I take those attitudes toward me, toward you, they fall into a quadrant. And if I can hold myself okay and I can hold you okay, how do you think we make decisions together? Probably pretty well, because we're prepared to talk out our needs, our hopes, our concerns, our desires, our ambitions. And if I hold that place, I'm prepared to talk to you about it. If you too come to the table with the same perspective, that you respect yourself, you also see me as having value and worth and something to contribute. And when you see me in that way, we focus on solving the problem. And sometimes the problem needs to go from making a business, focusing on a business decision and the problem of the business to what's happening between us. What is happening as we're talking about transition? There will be some dynamic between us that we're not understanding. And when we develop our awareness, do the work of learning more about ourselves, we show up to the world and to each other in a completely different way. And from that place, we really can, wait, do I get to go backwards? We really can provide success, because the success or failure of any decision of a business is determined by the process, by how people relate to themselves and how do people relate to each other. And when they relate in a respectful, valuing way, then of course they make decisions that are successful and effective. And every time we look inward and discover the truth of our value and worth, we do lead forward, we move forward, we achieve what it is we really want most. Thank you.
Lorna, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom, actionable advice. I hope you'll stick around and answer some questions. And with that, we're going to break for lunch for the next hour. Please join us just behind you. And we'll reconvene at about 10 minutes to 2 p.m. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back here in about an hour.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the lunch break. We're about to get our new conversation underway. So please take a seat if you haven't already. So my name is Erica Lini. I'm a personal finance reporter here at the Globe. And our next conversation is focused on getting children involved in the family business early on as a way to ensure better business continuity between generations. Our next speakers will be discussing strategies for educating the next generation on how the business operates. So please help me in welcoming our next speakers, Elaine Geary and Heather Geary Quant, co-presidents and co-CEOs of Geary Electric. Welcome. And joining us remotely is Peter Jaskovich, full professor and university research chair in enduring entrepreneurship at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. All right. So Elaine and Heather, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with today's topic of conversation?
Great. Well, perhaps if we start with telling everyone a little bit about our company and who we are, and then our roles, and that'll kind of lead into that, if you don't mind. So Geary Electric is an electrical automation and lighting distributor. We've been in business for 66 years. It was started by our father, and he decided to open this distributorship in Oakville, Ontario, because Ford Motor Company had moved into town in 1955, and he said they're going to need electrical products, and a lot of businesses will pop up in Oakville to support that plant, and they'll need electrical products as well. So that was kind of the seed of where we are. Today we have 26 locations in Ontario, 450 employees. So Heather and I are second generation, and we often joke that we're fortunate, or he is fortunate, that we didn't have any brothers, or we would have had to kill them, because we're in a traditional male industry. But joking aside, Heather and I grew up in a family that was very supportive of women's success and equality, and we're very lucky that we have each other. My title is co-president and CEO. I share that title with my sister Heather. And we have very clear responsibilities and roles so that the escalation or communications are clear for our folks. My passion and role is around operations and customer oversight.
Okay, and what about you, Heather?
So my responsibility is vendor strategy, ensuring that we have the right partners to support our customers and quality products, as well as I have a passion. Elaine doesn't like when I say this. I love people. She kind of says, well, that means I don't like people. But I do have a passion for people, the culture that we've built, and we have a big responsibility for 450 families, not just the employees, but all the people around that. So how do we create the right environment that they love to come to work? And so that's really why my passion is in the HR and the vendor strategy.
Heather, maybe mention how you ended up in the business. I think that's a nice story.
So on days off, PA days, Mother didn't want us in the house, and so she'd put Elaine and I in the back seat of the car when Dad would be making calls to customers. And so just watching how he had to, earn the respect, get the order against the competition, promise the deliveries, and he just kept on knocking on the door, and there was lots of rejection, but he never gave up. And I said, I want to do this. And I wasn't even in high school yet. I said, this needs to be called Geary and Daughters. And there were no women in the industry at the time. So, I was thinking a little bit ahead of my time, perhaps. And then Elaine did decide to come into the business. So it really was the Daughters. But we haven't ever put the shingle on the sign on the shingle. But really, that was what we wanted to do at a young age.
Amazing. And we also have Peter here. And so I was wondering, Peter, if you can tell us a little bit about your studies and your involvement with this topic.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me, Erica, and good to see you again, Elaine and Heather. My name is Peter Jastrovic. I grew up myself in a business family, and I became a professor in family enterprise to develop best practices for families, with a particular focus on supporting the next generation and to facilitate transition planning now for over 20 years. I do that at the Family Enterprise Legacy Institute, which I founded at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Oregon.
Okay, great. So Elaine and Heather, so we've already heard the story about how you spent PA days. Can you tell us a little bit more about how your involvement in the company started, sort of at what age, what were you doing, how your dad sort of got you interested in the business?
So I think where it starts, you grow up in that business, and we heard it with the group that Elaine and I listened to that came in. Your family involves you. It started with wrapping Christmas presents for our customers, and Mom and Dad would have the Christmas parties at home, and we would be the hosts, or Dad would have a vendor at the house. And so, you know, you had to be, you know, very polite and formal and listen. And so we learned about the business in a very informal way. And Mom and Dad would bring us to the conferences. They didn't have babysitters, and Elaine and I, you know, would be at all our industry events. And so just in a very informal way, introducing us to the industry, the people, and that really made the difference. Again, you know, I love people. So, you know, getting to know the people in the industry and just creating that attachment in a soft way, I think made the difference.
And then when Heather and I were in grade school, I joked earlier about a brother, but the other impact was Heather and I would have our chores on Saturday morning. We'd have to dust and vacuum the house. But because we had no brothers, we'd also be mowing the lawn front and back. But after we finished those chores, Dad would have every Saturday his week's worth of invoices. And Heather and I were in grade 8 and 7. And we were taking discounts off the list price and applying federal sales tax. We thought it was kind of cool that we were the only kids that knew the difference between margin and markup, but really not in the big scheme of things. But then later in life, in high school and during post-secondary, we worked all our summers and holidays in various roles. Could have been accounting or in the lighting studios or reception, et cetera. All different aspects of the company that we needed to keep busy with during those holidays and learn from. And then, of course, came in after university for both of us and into the business.
And so it sounds like some of the things you were doing, at least initially, were unpaid.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So when did you start getting paid?
Well, Heather's the HR. She also did the payroll later in life, so she's the best to answer that.
Truthfully, I'm the one who gave Dad his raises, and he never paid himself better than his employees. So when I got into doing payroll, I did give him some increases so he'd stay. So I think Elaine and I were probably 16 when we started getting paid, would be my guess. I don't think in grade school for sure we weren't earning any money, but when we could go and get a job somewhere else, because we did work at our cottages as well in the summer, when they started paying us $3 an hour, Dad decided to pay us $2.75. So.
And Peter, I wanted to ask you, so you study successful multi-generational family businesses. So from what Elaine and Heather just said, what resonates with you? Like what are the lessons that are sort of almost universally applicable here?
Well, I think they're mentioning a lot of best practices that we found when studying family businesses in Europe that are on average 11 generations old, with the oldest one being 33 generations old. It is, you know, talk about the business at home, get your hands dirty early on, getting involved, joining company events, right? You have to be able to identify with something, get to know it and be passionate about it. And usually it's a big bonus to be able to do it with parents, siblings, uncles, aunts. So I've heard all of these examples already from Heather and Elaine. So although they're not yet 11th or 33rd generation, they're already following many of the best practices. And later on, when you grow up with such a business, you can be excited about it. You get relevant education and then get experiences outside and come back to work in it. And we've seen that's a major advantage. And Canadian data show actually that because you work for free in a family business, whether it's the family farm, the family restaurant, the family shop, you actually have such a competitive advantage over peers who might be watching more TV or playing more computer games or doing other stuff, that once you finish your education at college or university, you have a head start outside of the family business. The career is faster, you earn better, you get better evaluations, you're faster promoted. So just imagine when you bring then that talent and back to your own business, right? Obviously, it can have a tremendous positive impact.
Amazing. And Heather and Elaine, so as a personal finance reporter, I would call you the sandwich generation. Which is, you know, usually has a different meaning, but in your case, you're sort of like the second generation that took on the reins of the business, but you're also in the process of ensuring that the third generation is involved in the business. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So first of all, Dad told Elaine and I, if you want to have a place in the business, we have a place for you. And the same rules have applied to our 6 children. Elaine has 2 and I have 4. That if you have a passion for the business and you think you have something to contribute, we will welcome you. But it isn't a job without expectations and responsibilities and reporting to people. And so we felt it was very important that they learn different aspects of the job, just like Elaine and I did. So it went as, from bringing up files from the basement and getting them shredded, to painting walls, to marketing, to working on the counter, warehouse, probably left out a few, Elaine. But very important that they learn all aspects of the business, just as Elaine and I did. So we're working shoulder to shoulder with our people so that they know we understand the challenges that they have in their jobs, and we can appreciate and empathize and help create a better environment if it's required, or help them with their challenges. They spend their work life is most of the days, and so how do we make it the best place to work?
And we're fortunate that of the 6 kids, or we could call them the grandkids, 4 have committed their careers to Geary Electric, and that's pretty exciting. So 3 of those 4 are today on our executive team as of a year ago. But post-secondary, they came into the business, they worked in the management training program, having to do various roles like inside sales, inside tech, outside sales, outside automation specialists, doing all kinds of areas in the business. And then they did that for 5 years, and then they moved into director roles called Directors of Strategic Transformation, and they executed our strategic plan from 6 years ago. They were the executors of the plan. So that was pretty exciting to watch them do that and succeed and work with all the teams. And then after 6 years of that, they came on to the executive in their different areas of passion. And then our 4th, who's committed his career, he's still in our management training program. He's a little bit younger, but he's well on the path, and he's supervising one of our branch locations. So it's pretty exciting to see how, like Heather and I, they're working up through the business and learning all the aspects. It's pretty nice.
And we also offer them other external training, whether it's resources like KPMG, Deloitte, vendor training. We think that outside responsibility is important for them to get that education. Family enterprise, they're involved in PAGs. So getting outside perspective is important to them as well, and so we continue to offer that opportunity to them.
Perfect. And I wanted to ask Peter, so on that note, you also mentioned the importance of outside experience. Is there a kind of outside experience that sort of lends itself best? Is it like working at competitors or suppliers, or in the same industry or outside the industry? Do you have any, do studies show if there's like a better kind of outside experience?
Absolutely. So we see the 2 things, I would say strategic education and strategic work experience helps. So working for competitors or in another country for companies in the same industry or in other contexts is of tremendous help. It could also be with suppliers to the industry, right? Or with customers to better understand the value chain. And we can see that these people then come back with tremendous ideas what to do better, because they kind of got a benchmark and they've seen how it works elsewhere. So they usually come with ideas how to change a strategic plan or how to better implement it, how to create more value. And they have then a good comparison of what works well and what does not, or what can be improved. And they also have more legitimacy. So, when they come back, so the non-family members, but also other family members, respect them because they bring something to the table that doesn't come from inside. And so they are listened to and they're more legitimized.
Okay, perfect. And I wanted to go back to the 6 cousins. So 4 in the company and 2 are not, are pursuing different careers. So are they involved, those 2 in the company still? Do they have a role?
They have more of an ambassador role, and They attend all the employee events, industry conferences, awards events. They also participate in our family governance meetings, where we're reviewing and sharing and open to questions on our financial statements, as well as reviewing and discussing the strategic plan, which covers our growth opportunities and any strategic capital investments that we're making.
And how did you approach sort of the conversation about should they be involved in the business or not? So sort of because was it a choice? How did you encourage that while also sort of leaving them, some agency?
So it's interesting that both of the two that did not choose their careers in the business both have a passion for people, like Heather does. So my daughter Whitney is a psychotherapist, and I tried every role possible for her, because I really wanted her in the business to make that decision. But no matter what I put her into it, she would come back, Mom, this is not my passion. Mental health is my passion, and that's the path that I want. So happy for her. I think Heather mentioned earlier that Dad gave us the option to come in or choose a different path, and it's nice that Heather and I were able to do that successfully as well with our other two. And maybe you want to talk about your daughter.
And my daughter Jacqueline, similar field to Whitney. She's not a psychotherapist, but she works within the Hamilton School Board, helping children that have challenges and creating programs to create success for them. And she has a responsibility for a number of schools. So they both have that empathy factor that's a 10 on the Richter scale, and we're really proud of them. And so someday they may decide to come into the company, and there'll be a role for them. And with their skill sets, I think today with culture and mental health and all the other things, they could play a very important and successful role at Gary Electric.
Perfect. And Peter, what does the research show in terms of best practices for family members who don't want to actively participate in the business? And I'm assuming that sometimes people might not want to be actively involved, but still want to have some kind of involvement, or often they might be shareholders or still have ownership in the business. So what's the best way to handle that part of the family?
These are very good questions, and let me start by saying that I think we, for example, pursue a very holistic idea. We meet many family members. The majority of future family or business owners won't be involved in the family business, and the holistic idea that we have and pursue is that we want to help them make better decisions in life and live a more fulfilled life. And that could be actively in the business, passively in the business, or maybe entirely outside of it. That's up to them. 2 generations ago, most people were forced into the business, especially when they were first-born sons. And some of them found their passion there, but it doesn't mean that they had it to start with, and many of them were unhappy there. So to start with, we're trying to see the individual, and our point is always that we want to help people be the best version of themselves and whatever they're doing to make a difference. I think Heather and Elaine mentioned here amazing stories regarding their daughters who are really trying to make a difference to other people's lives, and that's also our starting point. The second point then, we believe that people can pursue whatever they're passionate about and want to make a difference in, but they might still become an owner in a business and therefore have a responsibility for other people's lives there too, whether it's employees, other owners, stakeholders, the community, and so on. And here, for example, we offer tailored programs to larger businesses and are working on a larger open enrollment program for business families in Canada to prepare them for such role. For example, how to become involved in family governance, how to work on creating effective teams with other cousins, for example, and other family members, and how to ensure that if there are fewer family members involved in executive roles, right, that you know how to monitor them and move forward with the business. And there's a number of best practices that can be brought forward, and with a lot of experiential learning, because we always say, make mistakes early with other people's money and get the right education when you get home to do things right. And I believe that nowadays there's a lot of paths for people to allow them to be the best version of themselves, pursue a career and become a responsible owner in the family business without necessarily becoming involved. If they become involved, if they want to become involved, that's great, but they don't have to anymore.
Perfect. And with that, I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. So if you are in the room and you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. And then if you're following this remotely, you can also send us questions and we'll ask those to Elaine, Heather, and Peter. Oh,
we do have a question from the virtual audience here. They're looking for some advice on how to address partnership/shareholder agreements in terms of exiting, both proactively for a new agreement as well as reactively, where in an instance where one partner wants to exit. Peter, do you have any advice on that?
I actually do. It's a tremendous coincidence, but I've had so many family business owners ask me, and when I asked some leading advisors, they had exactly the opposite points. So we decided to conduct the first study that analyzed actually of all publicly listed companies in France, all shareholder agreements, see how they changed them and see how that is appreciated by the owners and investors. We recently published the study and we can see very clearly that shareholder agreements add tremendous value to families because they essentially mean that people agree to some rules. It's a bit like playing Monopoly without rules. Everybody brings his or her own rules, and that can cause tremendous frustrations and problems. But a shareholder agreement ensures that everyone agrees to some rules. How many family members are on the board, right? When are we allowed to sell shares? At which price? And if we can't talk to each other because of the conflict, what's the process to address that? Right? For which decisions do we need to get together up front to talk about it because we're sensitive about it? So when you define as a family sticky points that you might have and the processes to address them, it creates tremendous confidence with investors at the stock exchange. But we can also see that it helps to keep managed family dynamics, especially in larger families and later generations where you might have many members who do not know each other that well, but with tremendous power in an organization. So more to come on that topic probably soon in the media. But to respond to the question, they add tremendous value to families.
Perfect. And then we did have a question here in the room.
No, I'm always right and she's always wrong. It's easy.
It's a great question. So one of the things Heather and I pride ourselves on, or we acknowledge is a benefit, is the fact that we are so different in personalities. So our skill sets are different, the way our minds work, the way our passions are. I like to say Heather's the idea girl. She throws out these brilliant entrepreneurial ideas and I take them and package them up into something more concrete and finite. And that's because that's what I like to do. And that's not Heather's passion to be the detail. So it works beautifully for us. And so what we've encouraged our third gen to do is leverage each other's skills, capabilities, and passions, just like Heather and I did, because it works beautifully if you aren't at odds with it, but you embrace it and recognize you're all different and use those as strengths. So it's a great question.
And our father had a philosophy that right from the get-go, he said, you only have each other, and if you can't get along, there is no reason to have a business. So, you know, Elaine and I have had challenges from time to time, but when we're making a decision in the room, we can debate all day long with the executive team of you know, whatever it is, whatever the topic is, but when we leave that room, we have to be aligned, because if we look like we're going this way, then our people lose confidence in us. And so it was a really good piece of advice that Dad gave us early on.
Oh, there's a question over there.
Hi, do you ladies offer mentorship?
Absolutely. So through FEC, I was a mentor up until a year ago. Heather and I love going to, whether it's high schools or universities or colleges, to talk to groups, in particular to young women, because we do need more women in our industry. There is a place for women to succeed, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't mentor young men either. But the answer, absolutely.
You have a follow-up question?
Okay, that's good to know. Can I give you guys one of my business cards? I'm just going to introduce myself briefly. My name is Kiara. I'm originally from Barbados. I'm here to bring generational wealth and break generational curses. My company is all about building community and teaching youth, kids, immigrants, and families how to cook Barbadian dishes.
That's great. We're really excited to help, and we look forward to connecting with you.
And we have 3 more minutes. If we don't have questions from the audience, Andrea, do we have questions?
We have another virtual audience question. It's asking Peter if Canada differs in terms of succession from different regions in the world in terms of success.
Thank you.
So just to ensure that I understood the question correctly, whether there's different success in successions around the world, is that correct?
Just sort of how Canada differs compared to other regions, maybe.
Oh yeah, there is tremendous differences, and so it's important to be aware of cultural differences. For example, in Japan, they have a very high rate in successful successions, because if they don't have children who are passionate about it, they will adopt smart kids from university and make them members of the family. So from the Toyota family, for those of you who drive a Toyota, I think from the last 4 CEOs, 3 were adopted children who were CEOs, and only 1 came from the bloodline. In other Asian countries, it's known that they use arranged marriages to find proper people to get involved in the business. Understand that that's, you can look at it very differently, but it's been shown to give a boost to the longevity of businesses. And I think here in Canada, we need to look at different options out there. And we know that those who are successful, whether in Canada, in the US, or in Western Europe, they start very early, kind of with the birth of a child, in some cases already before, to ensure that you have the right dynamics. Like, for example, you've seen here between Heather and Elaine. So there's a lot for parents to do regarding parenting styles, for example. In previous generations, where parents wanted sometimes kids to be very competitive with each other, you don't get such amazing collaboration 1 generation later when they are in business. So we see the parenting style, the way how you talk about the business at home, it's super important to improve the likelihood of successful succession. And my general point is that everything is possible if you have a few years of time to develop next generation members, next generation teams. But we see very often that there is no preparation, no planning, and then there is an accident, somebody gets very sick, or in the worst case, somebody dies and something has to happen overnight, and that very rarely happens.
Perfect. And I think I can squeeze in one more quick question. We have 30 seconds. Heather, in our prep call, you said something that was really interesting to me. You said there was somebody at the company who wasn't so excited about working with you, and you managed to turn that around. And I'd love to hear the story of how you did that.
So I dropped into one of our branches, and it was one of the more senior leaders at Dad's company. And I dropped in, and he was just, honest with me. He goes, "I will never work for you, Heather. I just can't even imagine it. I'll retire first." So long story short, in 1988, Dad invited him to the executive team. He came on to our executive. He was one of the 3 non-family, and Elaine and I and Dad were the family, and we bridged those gaps, and we worked well together, and we had fun. But he saw it as a threat in the early days as I'm coming up through university, thinking he's going to lose his job, and it was all about Dad collaborating and surrounding us with good leaders to carry on his legacy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for today. So Elaine, Heather, and Peter, thank you so much. This has been a really great discussion. Thank you. Now to welcome Globe business reporter Claire O'Hara.
Thank you, Erica. So we've just heard the last panel reflect on building interest in the family business early on can help ensure continuity between generations. And similarly, having a governance structure in place can play an essential role in keeping both family and business priorities top of mind. So our next session is going to look how to build frameworks that can maintain the health of both. So please join me in welcoming our guests, Greg Moore, partner at Richter, and Naeem M. Ali, CEO of SM2 Capital Partners. So I thought maybe we could just start off by getting a little bit of context on your roles in relation to today's topic. And Naeem, why don't you go first? Why don't you tell us a little bit about SM2 Capital?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Naeem Ali. I am the CEO of SM2 Capital. We are in the hospitality business, so we own and operate assets like hotels, parking lots, a car rental company, and most recently, casinos, brick and mortar casinos in Alberta. And the firm was founded by my father and his brother. When my father was driving a budget rent-a-car through Calgary, the tires were bald, and he stopped at the budget rent-a-car to exchange the car or change the tires, and had a conversation with the then business owner, the franchise owner of Calgary, Alberta. And the franchise owner was lamenting that he didn't know what he was going to do with his business. And my father, who has recently immigrated to this country, this wonderful country, bought the business. He then called his brother and my grandfather in East Africa and said, I just bought Budget Rent-A-Car Calgary. Please come and work for me. Please come and work for us. And together, the two of them came from East Africa to Canada, and that's really how my story started. I spent my whole life running away from that family business. I washed cars starting at the age of 12 years old, and really knew that I did not want to be a part of this. That took me down to America, where I practiced structured law in Manhattan for approximately 6 years, and then came back to the family business in 2010. As well.
You didn't stay away.
I did not. I couldn't. It's hard to stay away. And I also am the chair of Family Enterprise Canada, which has been an excellent organization in guiding us with respect to best practices around governance and or having conversations with our families.
Great. Can't wait to hear more. And Greg, can you tell us a bit about your role at Richter?
Sure, not nearly as interested as Naeem's background and what he does. But so I'm a partner with Richter, Business Family Office, and I, along with some of my colleagues, have the pleasure of working with a lot of families like Naeem's that are going through various transitions. And we're fortunate to be in a position to see that very early on in the early stages as entrepreneurs are starting to build their businesses. And as we get into stages like we'll talk about today, into a transitional stage where maybe the business is going to transition to the next generation through a liquidity event or something of that sort. It's a very fulfilling business in the sense that we get to really learn what motivates our clients around both the business and their family. And really excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about it.
Great. So let's start off with you, Greg. On our call, we talked about the significance of the three-circle model. Maybe many of you have heard about it, but maybe we can talk about how that helps define the family business ecosystem. And let's just recap what that is for those who don't know.
Sure. I think what's interesting about the three-circle model, for those of you who are familiar with it and those who aren't, I'll explain it a little bit, but is more the genesis of it, because it wasn't until the late 1960s that really we identified that family businesses were very unique in their own right from publicly owned businesses. And it was John Davis and some of his colleagues at Harvard University who started to define what it was about the family business that made it so distinct. And in their work, they really identified sort of three distinct systems, and we've talked a little bit about them already today. But functionally, they would be the ownership, the business itself, and the family. And if you think of those three circles and the way they overlap, people within or stakeholders within the family business or family enterprise will be situated in very unique quadrants within that. And why is that important? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about governance today. Governance is a big word. Really, it's all about communication and building trust and understanding. And part of getting that trust and understanding is understanding perspective. So the three-circle model is really designed to kind of help people understand where they sit within the family enterprise and what their perspective may be relative to others. Because as soon as we can understand other people's perspectives, then we can build a little bit of trust and understanding, and that's what helps build the foundation of a strong family enterprise.
So where do you advise people to start when they're trying to build a governance framework into their company? And like, where does governance fit in that little three circle we talk about? When you sit down with them and they've never looked at this before, what's your advice?
Well, first of all, governance is a big word, and oftentimes it will scare people off. And so I think the one thing that hopefully some of the audience will get from some of the discussions today is that, trying to get to perfection may be overwhelming. Start very slowly and understand what it is that we want to achieve and what do we want to prioritize. So again, the idea of governance is around communication and trust. So finding areas where you can build some informal governance structures can be a useful starting point. So think of even within the family. So, we try and define the systems within a family enterprise in a very distinct way and try and keep them separated. Where they bleed over, sometimes that becomes complicated. But if we can start by way of even having an informal family governance structure around family meetings, being able to engage with the next generation. We've heard a lot of stories about people who come from a family business who understood early on in their journey what it meant to be part of a family business. They went to the business with their parents and were exposed to it. Having ways to engage your kids around what it is that is meaningful to them and the core values around the business and understanding the stakeholders that exist within it is an important starting point. So I guess the takeaway more than anything else is don't overthink it, start slowly, and you build upon it over time. Don't make it too formal.
Right. And so Greg, let's jump over. You've talked about the kinds of conversations that you needed to have with your founders, which is your father and your uncle, and sort of in order to build continuity planning. And how did that start off for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. When our next, so we're generation 2, and when our next generation, my brother and I'm the chief executive officer. My brother's the chief investment officer. My first cousin is the chief operating officer, and our CFO is married to a shareholder. And just for us to want to put a stamp on that company, for us to build even the C-suite required significant, it wasn't a light switch by any means. Our firm has been in operation for approximately 50 years. Since 2019, the firm was run by my father and my uncle at their Tuesday board meetings, which meant all decision making for the previous 45 years were made at these Tuesday meetings. And it was 6 hours of just tedious decisions. General managers from different business units would send up questions, and we would sit around a table every Tuesday and make those decisions. And that's how my founders made decisions. It was incredible, right? They all met, and that's what kept them together as a family. When we joined, we felt that was a colossal waste of our time from a decision-making standpoint, and that's management decisions. So we wanted to incorporate and put our own stamp on the company, and so we had to have conversations with our founders about how we wanted to make decisions related to operating the company, so those management decisions. So that really laid the foundation for the continuity plan, and as we established our agency in those Tuesday mornings, it took a while, but the founders transitioned to the C-suite so that we could operate and make decisions in a time frame quite faster than what they were making decisions, so that we could operate like that. So that was a form of governance in the sense that we needed a forum to manage this company within the context of how the next generation wanted to run the company, and that took a lot of time. But I was really happy in 2019 when our founders signed off on that. They showed us that they trusted us by allowing us to manage the company through that form of governance.
Sorry, I was going to just say, we talked about this at lunch a little bit, and it was interesting as Naeem was sort of describing this transition, and the takeaway for me was creating some relevance to the next generation. What was relevant to the current generation, the incumbent generation, was not necessarily relevant to the next generation. And so having that flexibility and ability to transition to make it relevant for the incoming generation was a huge step for your family.
You're absolutely right, yeah.
And you said when you showed the three-circle model, it was like a light bulb moment. right? Like that's not something they had incorporated before as the founders.
I have to really thank my founders, especially my father. When he saw that three-circle model and he saw the ownership circle and the difference between ownership, management, and family, he recognized relatively quickly that decisions need to be made wearing different caps, wearing an ownership cap, wearing a management cap, and then wearing the family cap. So the light bulb went off, but then he really tasked me with implementing some sort of mechanism, some sort of governance, some sort of framework of decision making, building out that process, transparency, clarity. And so he tasked me with that, and then he just kind of disappeared, which was hard because the family wasn't used to opening up and having these conversations in the ownership circle, in the management circle, and in the family circle. So today, we have the C-suite meets weekly to do management review teams, or management meetings. We have family shareholder meetings twice a year, and we have family council meetings twice a year. And those are aspects of governance that we use in our family to discuss a myriad of issues, not just business-related, revenue, expenses, and net operating income. Francesco presented a great set of questions earlier this morning. Those type of questions get answered in a different space and in a different form of governance, so to speak. And so I'm really thankful to my founders that they've given us the space and the intentional space to have different conversations wearing different hats.
I'll jump back to more about the difference of those meetings there. But Greg, both of you were talking about that it comes down to communication. When does government become the most difficult to navigate? And like you said, it's a big word.
Yeah.
So it might be transitioning through time. But when is the most difficult, you think?
Well, of course, governance is going to be the most difficult to navigate when you're going through some sort of period of dislocation. So that dislocation can come in a variety of different ways. Is it a shareholder dispute? Is it a death in the family? Is it, the potential sale of the business? So part of what's so important about governance or a framework for decision making is being able to determine during a period of relative harmony within the family enterprise, what is our path forward? What are the rules of engagement around how we make a decision, how we collectively come together as a group and dialogue around what's important to us? Because if we can set those guideposts, it doesn't have to be a very strict framework, and sometimes that's what's really, I think, frightening for entrepreneurs, is they became entrepreneurs and successful because of that ability to make fast decisions. And the idea of governance means, well, you're just going to put a framework around me and take away that flexibility. But the idea is to have a bit more of sort of some guideposts where we can operate within. And if you can determine that during a period of relative stasis, then when you do get to a point of dislocation, the rules of engagement are relatively clear, and people feel like they've had some agency in making those guideposts. It's not to say that you're not going to have any disagreements or conflict, but at least you've got a path forward to be able to help resolve and understand that conflict. So the takeaway again is do it early when you are at a period of relative calm.
Is that your experience as you transitioned from the founders to the next generation?
Yeah, I like how Greg uses those moments of dislocations, which in any given month or any given week in our family, we have moments of dislocation. And we have friction points, whether it is within the generation 2, whether it is founder G1, generation 2. But what I feel that governance has given us, and I don't think having friction points is a bad thing. I think it's a real foundation for having great conversation. And I can assure you our family has had a ton of friction points. But what it has resulted in is that although people have slammed their fists on the boardroom table and walked out, because we have governance, because we have these intentional spaces for discussion, they do come back because we are family. And that's been pretty cool to see, both between whether it's my brother or my cousin, my chief operating officer, or my CFO or my CIO, or whether it's with a founder. We've definitely had disagreements, but we've created intentional spaces, either at the management level, to talk about things, or at the family shareholder or family council meetings or spaces to talk about things that need to be addressed there. And that's been hugely impactful for, number one, for us to feel comfortable as we put our own stamp as Generation 2, as we build our own careers and put our own stamp on our business and this family business. And as well, it's helped with our relationships, which is really ultimately, you know, we sometimes say, why are we doing this if we can't get along, or if we're not doing this together? That's okay if we don't want to do certain things together, but we've really enjoyed the journey thus far of working together.
And if I can, because one of the things you said, which I think is so important and so unique to family-owned businesses, is that as family units, we are renowned for avoiding conflict. Right? We try our best not to have conflict. Yeah. And what you just described is actually creating a space where we can be safe and actually engage in creative conflict, which is really important within the business. Mm-hmm. If you look at a non-family owned business, we don't run away from conflict. We don't necessarily embrace it, but we're willing to engage in constructive conflict for the best of the business. Sometimes families aren't willing to do that. So exactly what you described creates a very, very constructive environment for that.
Yeah.
And I want to jump off. You were talking about the different meetings, and about, you know, you have your board meetings, you have family councils, and you've also were telling me that you also have some family members who are non-employees who are shareholders. So how do you sort of navigate? Like, what are the different? Like, you have a family council meeting, and then you have your shareholder meeting. You know, what do those meetings look like, and how involved are the people, the family members who are not, you know, there for the day-to-day operations?
It's a great question. So we are a cousin consortium of 5 cousins. My brother, my first cousin, and my CFO, we're all family, we all work in the business. We have 2 extremely strong and powerful women shareholders in our group. And growing up in our culture, my father and my uncle never really told us a lot. Although we knew we ran businesses, we maybe didn't know our balance sheets. And that went on for quite some time for these 2 strong, powerful women in my organization who are my shareholders. And when I became CEO in our first shareholder meeting, which was 2009, our first shareholder meeting was 2017, and I wanted to open up the books, transparency, clarity, accountability. I was socializing the idea of the C-suite, but I really wanted to open up the books for my shareholders and almost model what a public company might do. And so I used that opportunity to engage with my shareholders who are not active in the business. So to answer one of your questions, in the family shareholder meeting, our shareholders get a deep dive and get to look at what's going on in the business. Curated balance sheet. They can ask any questions they want at any time, but that's a forum that we use where non-active family members get a chance to see what the business is doing twice a year. They get to check in on what do dividends look like this year, what is our cash flows. But I really enjoy that because they feel that there's transparency and clarity. And in my cousin generation, and maybe in our culture, even in the Indian culture, where sometimes it's like the oldest keeps all the information, like I saw in my father's generation, those are barriers that I wanted to break down. And especially given the education and the insight that my women shareholders provide to me, I use that as a forum. So transparency and clarity and accountability. My cousin, my Farin, she's very good at holding me accountable as the CEO and making sure that I am doing the things that I said I would do. And that's trust. And that builds trust. So long answer to your question, the shareholder meetings are designed to do that. And family council, we get a little bit more soft skills where we're asking, how do we live our best lives? What would you like to do? Do you want to live here? How is your cash flow? Do you need help with investments? Those type of questions we'll ask in family council.
I love on the call you said your father, when you sat down to do soft skills, he was like, what are we going to do for 8 hours with soft skills?
In our first family council back in 2017, Mohammed and Shiraz, my father and my uncle, they were like, we are going to be in a room for 2 days with a facilitator. We brought in a family enterprise advisor, incredible. And they were so surprised that we would be having discussions not related to revenue, expenses, and net operating income. And you know what? Our next generation needed that. And I'm really thankful that they stayed in the room for 2 days because it really set the foundation for then the next 6 years for us.
It's amazing the connection that can happen. We do that, and we've got a financial literacy program we do with some of our business families. And we did a session on family governance with the second generation. And it went very well to the point where the second generation said, we want to bring the first generation into this session. They did not come in voluntarily. They were really not excited about spending a day with a group of us. But by the end of it, both the husband and wife said that was probably one of the best periods of time that we've had with our kids to sort of understand some of the dynamics that we hadn't given any consideration to.
It kind of leads into my next question for both of you is what is the role of the independent advisors in governance? And Greg, maybe you want to continue on.
Well, it's part of bringing some of that facilitation in to make sure, in a lot of cases, particularly with families and family-owned businesses, that all voices are getting represented, right? Oftentimes, and we had this conversation at lunch, we'll always be the kids of our parents or, our siblings, and you take certain positions. And sometimes by default, the way you relate to other people within your family is not the way you would within a business. And sometimes your voice, you may not feel that you've got voice. So having an independent advisor help you navigate through that to help ensure that strong personalities, while still being able to be themselves, understand the importance of sticking back, letting other voices come in and having agency over the whole process. Because the most important part from my perspective around governance is ensuring that it's relevant for everybody and that ensuring that people have had the ability to give their voice and know that at least they've been heard, because if not, then they're going to feel that it was just effectively prescribed to them, and then they will not be able to participate in the same way that you would have hoped.
Is that your experience?
Yeah, this morning Ms. Lorna made a great statement on one of her slides. What doesn't get talked about gets acted out. And, I saw that even in my own behavior in those initial board meetings that I was being a participant to. And when I brought in an independent advisor to help draft the agenda, to also talk to the entire family individually about what he or she was seeing in our family, it was so helpful. Also combined with the fact that my family doesn't need me to be bringing in the agenda all the time. In fact, it was much more effective when the agenda was drafted by an independent advisor in our family shareholder and family council meetings, because everybody felt that it was a fair agenda because they had some input, because the agenda would be drafted by the discussions the advisor would have across the board with all generations of the family. So it wasn't, there was no questions about the motives behind an agenda or what have you. And to your point, in our family, it helps to have somebody in the room that can facilitate difficult conversations, because we're still family. And we can still act like we acted at the dinner table when we were children and shut down and not communicate. And independent advisors kept us honest in those situations, and I appreciate that. Our advisors have also pushed us, challenged us to have very difficult conversations about continuity of planning, about wealth transfer, about roles and responsibilities. That C-suite that I mentioned, we used an independent advisor to also help us draft our roles and responsibilities around who was going to do what. And that has bettered our business because we're now leveraging our individual strengths. I think if I just gone in with my 4 brothers and said, I'm the CEO and you are this and you are that, based on your skill set, I don't think that would have helped our business. And I don't think that would have helped our relationships. So that's an example of where independent advisors have helped us a lot. Now, they all ended up in the roles that I thought they would, but that's beside the point. Like everyone empowered themselves and made the decisions themselves.
Great. I do want to open the floor. I think we have some time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If you just want to raise your hand and we can run a microphone over to you as well. If there's any questions online, you can submit them. And is there any online, Andrea?
We do have an online question here. It says, given the high likelihood of a family conflict and resulting sibling clashes, is the exit of a family member a permanent exit, or should there be a more open door policy that allows an individual to re-engage with the firm once the heat has been turned down on a conflict? Any advice?
From a management standpoint, if my CFO or my COO or my CIO resigns tomorrow, I think it would be very difficult to bring them back in at their roles and responsibilities if they've resigned, or if they were to be if we were to separate in the management level. As ownership, in the ownership circle, I mean, we're all shareholders. So we can't, when you leave the room, you're still a shareholder. If you're leaving the room because you're upset about something and you need some time to cool off, we're all still shareholders. So, and you are still a shareholder. And we have a responsibility to be in that room. So we'll take every measure or do everything we can to engage counsel, advisors to help us get back on track in that ownership circle.
Yeah, if family shareholders, it's always difficult. And I think one of the most important things is when you are shareholders, understanding where the path to exit is, right? And having that well-defined to begin with, so that if and when the time comes, being able to go out the door is already well established. There's also the concept of being a responsible shareholder. So in a situation where maybe emotions are charged, somebody's decided to leave the ownership circle, do you want them to come back once the tensions have eased? Part of it sort of determine, well, can you come back as a responsible shareholder in support of the other stakeholders that are involved? Yeah. Because there's more than just the one shareholder.
Great. And oh, can we squeeze one in? We'll squeeze one in. If there's a microphone.
Thank you. Have you seen a difference in female versus male independent advisors, both at Richter and from an external company? For example, there are more women entering executive positions in family businesses, and there are also more women entering the workforce in these advisor roles. And there can be positives like, say, women with emotional intelligence, but there are also negatives where there's still older generation heads of the families who may not interpret the advice of women, say, who may remind them of their granddaughters or their daughters. So it's a bit of a broad question, but if you've had experience with this, or how has this changed?
I think it's great to have a combination of the two, right? Because you're going to bring different skill sets to the table, and as an advisor, it's so important where you are creating that connection, that level of trust. And unfortunately, there may be some generational issues, as you pointed out, where maybe a founding shareholder who's, as an aging gentleman, may not necessarily appreciate as much getting advice from a strong female. But by the same token, there are going to be other stakeholders in the business who are going to appreciate that perspective. So having that flexibility, I think, is a really important part of surrounding yourself with the right group of advisors and maybe not be specifically focused on one.
I would add, number one, I think, a key inflection point for asserting our identity for the next generation was choosing our new advisors or our advisors and not necessarily utilizing the advisors from G1. That just felt like it gave us a lot of agency. To answer your question, we have a committee that gets struck, and the last committee was myself and Faureen, a very strong, powerful woman, and myself. And we interview advisors based on the pulse that we have and the issues that we feel are prioritized, that need to be prioritized. And so we haven't really chosen, we've both been a part of the process, and we've chosen both male and female advisors based on the needs, hopes, and concerns of the issues that we are trying to address.
Great. And I think we're going to have to leave it there for now, but I would like to take my opportunity to say thank you to Naeem and Greg for joining us. It's been a great conversation. We probably need like 20 more minutes next time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker. Our keynote, Steve Buscemi, is a celebrated entrepreneur and advocate for family businesses. Beyond his direct involvement with Family Enterprise Canada, Steve's journey with his father, from creating Beau's, a leading craft brewery, to spearheading charitable initiatives, showcases his exceptional leadership and commitment to making a difference. His experiences building a beloved brand and creating memorable moments through Beau's Oktoberfest demonstrate his capability to foster growth, inspire innovation, and cultivate meaningful connections. So please join me in welcoming Steve Buscemi, the CEO of Family Enterprise Canada and former Chief Executive Officer of Beau's All Natural Brewing Company, to the stage.
Thank you. That's Steve Beauchesne, not Steve Buscemi. Also a pretty cool guy, but not me. How's everyone doing? Yeah? It's been a good day so far? I'm sorry to ruin it for you. Just kidding. So I've been the CEO of Family Enterprise Canada for a total of 5 weeks. So as you can tell, I'm now an expert in my field. And I'm also, as part of that, I get to be the CEO of Family Enterprise Foundation as well. I'll tell you a little bit about both of those. But I really am here, I think, mostly to talk about a bit of my experience having started Bose, transitioned ownership from with my dad, and then eventually the sort of the realities that precipitated us selling the company to Steam Whistle a few years ago. That's what we're gonna do. I'm just gonna double check. Yeah, you can see this funny little picture up here. So we actually borrowed this from Succession Plus out of Australia. It's pretty funny. And it kind of talks a little bit about what I think succession planning is for a lot of companies these days, which is, yeah, we didn't do anything, and now you're stuck with it. Oh, did I go too far? I went too far. There we go. All right. I'm new at these pointer thingies. That's me and my dad at Oktoberfest. We started the company in 2006. My dad had been running a textile business, and growing up as a kid, I got to learn a lot about business from listening at the family table while he and my mom talked about what was going on in their business. And then I got to work there in high school, and so I got a lot of time working with my dad beforehand. But one day he came to me while I was in Toronto and basically said, I'm shutting down the business and I've got to do something else with my life. Would you mind brainstorming a few ideas with me? So we sat down and he had a few ideas. And then one of the ideas he said was, you know, Steve, you're always brewing different beer and you're bringing different beer home with you. What would you think about starting a brewery with me? And I was like, well, if you're serious, Dad, not only do I think it's a good idea, but yeah, I'll sell the house, I'll move home, I'll start a brewery with you. And so we spent the rest of the day just dreaming up this brewery we were going to start. The next day we sobered up. It still seemed like a good idea. And we just started working on it. And we got the business off the ground about a year later. And we kept working on it. And we kept working on it. And somewhere around 2012, we had a very quiet succession where I started using the title CEO, and he stopped. And he stayed on in the business right to the very end, but we did it in a way where he could pick and choose his projects, be as involved as he wanted to be in certain things. But we kind of had a very quiet succession where kind of stability was kept, and it worked quite well back in 2012. And we were having so much fun with it, you would question why would we ever give that up. And in fact, a lot of the stories I'll tell you through this have a lot to do with some of the planning I was starting to do for succession planning. As well as some of the things that I maybe missed out on, which then eventually led to us making the decision to sell the company. I'll throw in a couple stats here too. I apologize if you've already heard this, but 60% of family businesses are planning to have an ownership change in the next 10 years. That's a big number. Only 40% of those businesses have identified someone within the younger generation that actually will be, the plan is for them to succeed. So 60% of families about to change, 60% of those businesses don't have a succession plan for the next generation. So there's a massive change that is coming through Canada. And who knows if those numbers will shift as we get closer to the actual succession date, but those are the stats of right now. There we go, that worked. 60% of families about to change, 60% of those businesses don't have a succession plan for the next generation. So there's a massive change that is coming through Canada. And who knows if those numbers will shift as we get closer to the actual succession date, but those are the stats of right now. There we go, that worked. Yeah, a bit more about family businesses. About 2/3 of private sector firms are family businesses. So that's a whopping $574.6 billion of Canada's GDP. Almost 7 million Canadians are employed at a family-run business. And this is right across the country, from Atlantic fisheries to prairie wheat, service industries right across, and quite a few actually brewers are family-run businesses. You've got Moosehead out east, you've got the Granite in Toronto. Up till very recently, you had Bose. My introduction actually to Family Enterprise Canada actually came back in 2010. We run a program called the Family Enterprise of the Year Award. So we actually won the award in 2010. So I'm mentioning that just in case any of you have great family businesses that you want to get nominated. We do this annually. It's a great program. But FEC, it sounds like you've been having an advertisement for Family Enterprise Canada all day, so I apologize for giving you a little bit more of one here. But I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of the folks coming up here have had a lot of involvement with our organization, because this is what we do. So we've got access to educational resources, lots of expert advice. We've got a network, a community that you can be involved in as a family business. There's lots of stuff you can do with that. And then we have the foundation side, which is our charitable side, which is actually the brain trust for Family Enterprise Canada. And it holds literally the world's largest resource center for family entrepreneurs. So I'll give you a taste of some of the things that we talk about at Family Enterprise Canada while kind of weaving the story together of kind of what happened with Bose. There's a lot of family businesses out there that end up being successful at the cost of the family. And it's not an uncommon story to see successful business, broken family, or non-broken. Well, there's very few circumstances where the business wasn't successful and the family's still in a good place either. So you have to understand that you're not just risking your financial wealth when you're in a family business, you're also literally risking your entire family relationship. In my family, we started off really, really tight. And every conversation that we had was about, this is mom and dad's retirement on the line. We got to make sure this is successful, and we got to just work at it. As we became successful as a company, it became sometimes a little bit more difficult to kind of remember that that's why we were doing it. And I think we were all guilty at different times. I got caught up in the whirlwind success of the brewery. And so for me, it stopped being this is about mom and dad's retirement. It started becoming this is my legacy. So I was driving the business extra hard for other members of the family. It became, well, but shouldn't there be some wealth sharing for us? For other members, it was a matter of, why do I have to work so hard at this? Like, can I take a break? All these sort of questions were coming, and we didn't necessarily have a good strategy for dealing with it. So we did what a lot of families do, is we don't talk about it. So I would keep pushing as hard as I could. They would, do their things, and then everyone else in the company sitting there going like, hey guys, can't you get this figured out? So we had a lot of issues that came up, and we sometimes addressed it okay, and then sometimes not so okay. But the idea that we try to preach at Family Enterprise Canada is that every family member can contribute if they're given the right structure and they're able to sort of individually uphold and respect the family legacy. They have to be given the right way to do that, and have, for sort of the folks passing on, you have to understand that not everyone should be the board chair. Not everyone should be the finance director or operations manager or whatever it is. So you don't just put someone in the role because they're the family. You put the right person in the right role. And that's part of what we try to help with. So we've got this, just a second here. Something's weird on this. There we go. It works, yeah, okay. I'll just keep going. So in an era where tradition often overshadows innovation, family business has to address a paradigm shift. Things are changing, and things like picking your successor entirely based on their gender or what order they were born in largely doesn't apply anymore. I say that I am the firstborn son in my family and the second-born child, so we kind of modeled exactly the opposite of what I'm telling you. Not by design. I can tell you my dad would have, in an instant, brought my sister on as the CEO instead of me, had she wanted that. But kind of this idea of exploring and nurturing that talent is really important. This is my two oldest daughters, Ruby and Vivian, and they've been in more they were in more bars by the age of 5 than I think most adults have been in their entire life. I literally dragged them everywhere because I thought it was fun. So this is them in the brew house. In our early days, we used to do things like we'd hold these Laverne and Shirley parties, we called them, because we didn't have a bottling line. So what we would do is get all of our fans to come in and package beer for us for 6 hours for free. But we had our kids helping out, and so Ruby's the one in blue there, and she would put the tags on the bottles, and then Vivian in purple there, she'd put the little stickers on top. And it was hilarious for me to watch, because if you were one of the volunteers and you started to slow down at all, Ruby was on your case like you wouldn't believe. And I was like, okay, well, I figured out who's going to be my operations manager. My sister has 2 boys as well. And by the age of 6, they could pour a perfect beer. And I mean, like, no overfill, just that much foam. Kind of all of us were very keen to have our family as part of the business. But they're still a little bit on the young side at this point. So kind of would have needed another 10, 15 years before they could have potentially taken this on. Ruby, my oldest, is now, she's now 20. So she's a little taller than that now. So anyways, the idea of promoting this early involvement helps your next generation just create that emotional bond to the company. And it also starts exposing them at an early age to some of the issues and some of the people that'll be involved in later on. And again, for me, a lot of this came very naturally because I'd grown up in my dad's family business. But a lot of families struggle with how to, whether to, when to, all these questions. This is kind of a same idea. This is me dragging them to, I can't remember which political fundraiser, but we were lobbying hard at the Ontario Craft Brewers Association that year, I'm pretty sure. So it must have been some law we wanted changed. And I found that was the most successful way to lobby, was to bring 2 little girls with me. But like, you kind of have to pass that law now, don't you? So again, just developing those training programs, and some of it formal, some of it informal, all that kind of stuff is really essential to kind of passing the torch on. The idea of having mentors and peers is super important. For example, at Family Enterprise Canada, we actually have sort of specific programs for the next generation. And what we'll quite often do is combine a day of learning with some social events so that you get this ability to learn and network. I find, a lot of the learning you do is from hearing other people's stories who are going through similar things or have gone through it before. So having this kind of group get together, there's not a lot of people typically in your social circle that have gone through family succession kind of things. So putting you in a room with other people who have done that, we find is quite helpful. There's a wonderful concept of rotating through the company into different positions, so that as you're coming up, you're not kind of going up in the normal hierarchical way that someone would grow up in the ranks in your company, but rather being, moved from one department to the next. So you get that breadth of knowledge. At Bose, there was really only 2 reasons we did that. So we didn't do a good job of this. But what we did is, if we had a crisis, there was one family member, my sister, who we knew we could always put in. And whatever the issue was, you'd know that she'd get it solved. And I won't tell you who the other person was, but every time we needed to fire them, they got moved to another place in the company. And so this is something that we weren't intentionally doing to bring up the next generation. It was what I think a lot of family members do, which is you're either shuffling a problem to a different department, or you're using your best people or your best family members to solve something that you just don't trust anyone else to solve. But having a program in your company to actually rotate your next generation through is a great way for them to fully understand the dynamics of your company. Again, I apologize if this is starting to sound really advertorial, but it doesn't have to be specifically a family enterprise advisor, but making sure that the independent advice you get is from someone that understands not just the business issue you're trying to solve, but understands your family issues. So we, at Family Enterprise Canada, we run the Family Enterprise Advisor program. It's a 1-year program, 6 modules. It's pretty rigorous, and then at the end you get a certification. There are other ways to build this expertise, and there's other family business centers around. So it doesn't have to be that, but I can tell you with Bose, a lot of the start to our issues came when in 2016, we went to a really good financial advisor and said we wanted to start doing some wealth shifting. And we had this program in mind to do an employee ownership plan. And the advisor gave us great technical advice and very poor advice for our family. And we ended up structuring something that ended up causing a lot of financial grief for the family while being great for our employees and other folks, which then made it not so great for anybody at the end. And so had we done a better job of identifying the need to have a family conversation, my dad wanted to get some cash out of the business. He was ready to retire. And instead, that cash has been kind of locked in the business for far longer than any of us really wanted. And that was, again, partially my tone deafness for not listening to him, and partially not using an advisor that really understood the family. You were just talking about governance, so I won't kind of talk too much about that again, but having the clear governance helps a lot. Again, with our company, the governance was me and Dad, and what would happen would be me and Dad would make a decision, and then if someone in the family didn't like it, they'd just largely ignore it. And then we'd have this like long drawn out process where someone's still doing something that we'd rather they didn't, because we didn't have a proper governance way to handle that. The idea of succession planning, we treated like an event. So once I was in the role of CEO and Dad had kind of moved into a role that he was happy with, we were like, oh, we're done. And what we didn't do was think of what happens if something happens to Steve. So there were folks in the family and in the organization that had we thought about what happens if succession needs to happen before the next generation, we weren't prepared for any what ifs. We were still thinking, well, we've got probably 20 years and then it'll be one of the 4 4 kids, and then eventually my brother had 2 daughters, so one of those 6 kids, we're good. We didn't think, what if? And there's this whole journey that we're on, right? I won't go too much into this, but just again to mention, there are several universities with family-run programs that we could have taken advantage of. There's the Family Business Network. I don't know if that's been talked about today, but that's really for companies that have offices in multiple countries and need a more international kind of understanding of the dynamics. There's all sorts of nuances that are there. And then I think sort of where we really were stumbling a lot was this idea of balance. So I was working nonstop, so wasn't balancing my family. There wasn't a lot of balance for anyone else's family. And we kind of were getting more and more strained as kind of time went on. And then I had probably the worst 6 weeks of my life. So that's my wife, Karina, and my youngest daughter, who's now 3. But that was on her first birthday, and the week before that, Karina found out she had cancer. 2 weeks before that, my eldest daughters are with another woman, and she actually died suddenly. So I had 2 teenage daughters who were in the midst of enormous grief. My wife was diagnosed with cancer. I'll give you the good news now. She's fully recovered. At the time, it looked really bleak, but she did recover. And then 2 weeks after that, the bank told us that as far as they were concerned, COVID was over, and could we please give them all of their money back right away, please? They didn't actually say please. Either of those pleases didn't exist. And so I had a family crisis. I had 2 family crises and a financial crisis, and we were in the middle of COVID. And I had to make a very split decision. I won't say it was a hard decision. It was actually a very easy decision. But we didn't have someone in the family that could handle that level of crisis in the business while I took care of the family. So I had to choose either the family or the business. Talked with my father and the rest of the family, and we made the decision together to sell. Absolutely no regrets on that decision. A lot of regrets for not realizing that succession planning is a process that doesn't end when you get into the role of CEO. I'm incredibly happy now to get to work at Family Enterprise Canada because I see this as part of my journey is now helping other family businesses make it to the next generation and to put in place some of the structures that could have stopped that from happening to our company. So I'm hoping that my very expensive lesson becomes something that lots of people get to benefit from. But yeah, life is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you can't be prepared for everything, but the more prepared you are, the more you can weather the big storms. Transparency, trust, communication, it's vital. Had we done a bit more sharing openly in earlier days, I don't know if things would have been different, but it's possible. And being able to build that trust, I think, goes a long way. But yeah, I think the biggest message from me and from Family Enterprise Canada's perspective is, that there's going to be economic disruption. There's going to be another thing that happens. It's not like COVID was the last thing. There's going to be another thing and then another thing. And we as humans always seem to think that, oh, we got through that, now we're good. And it's hard for us to kind of fathom that it won't be that long before there's another economic crisis or another crazy thing that the world throws us. And I don't know if this is just my age showing, but it seems like as I get older, the crises get weirder. So anyways, having your succession plan in place and realizing that your succession plan isn't done just because you wrote it on paper is, I think, sort of the key message that I wanted to leave with you today. So yeah, we got this, right? Ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta-da.
Steve, thank you very much on behalf of everybody for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us. Very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bill McLean. I'm a member of the team at the Richter Business Family Office, and I have the pleasure of wrapping up the day before, for those of us who are in person here, we'll be able to move to a networking opportunity together. And for those who are on screen, please feel free to pour yourself a drink at home if you wish. I'd like to round this up first by, if you can join me with a round of applause for all of the amazing people who came up onto this platform. You are brave, amazing, inspiring people willing to share your stories within your own families and your own experiences. And on behalf of everyone who has participated in this session, we thank you for your willingness to share all of that with us. Just a couple of quick notes in reflection over the course of the day, a day that went by very quickly, but Francesco started speaking with us about succession versus sale. And while there were several things that he called out, what stood out for me was the reference to socio-emotional wealth and the kind of questions that families do need to ask themselves every day, for which I'm one of the people that has the good fortune of helping ask those questions. So well done, Francesco. We talked about common succession challenges, and Kathy, Sherney, Sheena, and Roger, on behalf of this room, I want to thank you for your honesty and your humanity in the way you shared your stories about your family situations and how deeply succession can be from a personal perspective for those families who are going through it. You also called out the importance of being brave in bringing facilitators or those who need to assist you if it's necessary in order to help move through that process and not be scared to ask the difficult questions. So well done. Lorna, your psychology of decision making, calling out the challenge between knowing yourself and bringing your true self to the table versus potentially the family wishing for you to stay inside your sandbox is a very compelling call out for families who are going through these changes. When we talked about strategies to educate next gen, Elaine, Heather, and Peter, all three of you spoke so eloquently about the need to build experiences across your family, both applied within the family as well as outside externally and getting other support, be it education or other outside experiences. So thank you very, very much for that. Naeem and Greg, you debunked the word governance for a lot of people and a lot of families who do have a concern about it. And really what you did is helped us understand. It's about establishing a common understanding and a set of awareness that the family can move forward with together in order to better direct the course of action that the family wishes to take. Well done. And Steve, as I said, both thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story, and also the very best of luck with you, with your organization, because it plays a very important role in this country. The last couple of comments I'd like to make from a Richter perspective, on behalf of our managing partner Tasso and our chief operating officer Mary Pierre, we began a journey with the Globe and Mail quite some time ago where we came together and collaborated with the Globe and had a discussion about how we could bring the best of content forward for families who are going through transitions. And I just spoke with Tasso this afternoon, and he said what he really wants to call out is the Globe has been a phenomenal partner working on this, collaborating and bringing this type of forum forward. So let's hear it for the Globe, please. And the last comment on behalf of all of my peers in our organization, we are a business family office of 600 people that have existed. We're just shy of the birthday of our 100th anniversary. The hardworking people of our organization come in every single day with one fixation, and that's on how to support families in business or families moving through transition and create the best possible trust that we can with them and to assist them in solving the single biggest challenges that they're having. Our organization started with a very disciplined foundation of accounting and audit work, and that's where we learned in the trenches how to deliver that discipline. Over the course of our history, and in particular in the last decade and a half, we recognized that our families and our clients had needs that laterally moved between the business side of interest and the family side of interest. So we aptly recognized it was time for us to move forward and build our proposition as a business family office in Canada. And we are beyond proud as we reach our 100th anniversary that every day we come to work and build the trust with those families. So on behalf of Richter, I want to thank you very much for all being a part of this. And with that, I'll pass it over to the Globe.
Thank you, Bill. And I guess the Globe and Mail would just like to thank everyone in the audience and all of our speakers for the insights they've shared today. As well, I'd like to recognize Richter for sponsoring today's event. And that concludes our event. So please enjoy our networking reception just right outside these doors. Thank you.